What is up, everybody? Happy Wednesday evening to you all. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. I am Anthony. He is John. And you heard me yammer about the unofficial yet close to official signings for the Bengals after a slow start in free agency. They tee one up, to use a golf metaphor, John. You and I like golf. They tee one up and crush one down center cut, 350 yards, and just set themselves up nicely, at least on offense to this point, as they extend T. Higgins and Jamar Chase to mega extensions, keeping them here for really towards the end of the decade here, and along with their quarterback. So kind of some things that were, for one player, 2 years in the making, a year plus in the making for another. But the Bengals got it done. Kudos to them. Kudos to the players for also, stating that they want to be here and want to make this work. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. You heard me yammer on solo on Saturday night about this, so I want to get John's take on these contracts, on what has transpired here. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what's next. We've got a free agent profile and a little bit of chat on Trey Hendrickson, as he is likely the next guy on deck and has yet to be dealt, has yet to be extended. A lot of stuff going on there. So appreciate you all joining us, whether it be live or after the fact. We had a ton of people Saturday evening. Hopefully we get a similar crowd with us here this evening, but we appreciate you tuning in however you are able. You can get this show, the Believe in Cincy podcast channel. You can get this show on your favorite audio streamer: iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, all of the major ones. We are there on the Believe in Cincy, BLEAV, newer feed as of kind of late last year. So go resubscribe, leave us a review if you can. We appreciate that. And if you like the video side of things, you can go to Cincy Jungle's Facebook. You can tune in and subscribe, or I guess follow some of our accounts on X, and then of course the YouTube channel, where we bring you these live shows, 3 and Out, and their shows are on there as well. And we're going to be bringing you some other creative content on the YouTube channel, YouTube exclusive. So check that out. We appreciate it. Do the subscribe, like, all the things. We appreciate that. John, I don't even know if I asked, how are you? I think I just kind of rambled on again for like 3 minutes straight. How you doing? Have you caught your breath from the last few days here? And good to see you, my friend.
No, it's all good. Like Sunday night was crazy. Monday morning was crazy, but in typical Bengals fashion, now we're back to nothing really happening, which was the majority of last week. But man, the feelings, I think, have been fluctuating massively, at least from over here, because while it was always all we talked about was how the Bengals planned to do this, and then they didn't do it before free agency, and then they did some stuff in the beginning of free agency, and then they did nothing for the next part of free agency, and then it was, this is actually happening. And I'm really glad that our program was one of the programs that did shout out James Rapine for being on top of this, being ahead of everyone else with this.
Absolutely.
He's been on fire, I think, with a lot of his inside knowledge, and he's been doing it in a very ethical and very professional way of doing it. So kudos to him for all the work that he's been doing for SI and Bengals Talk and everything in that regard. But it went from like Bengals fans kind of thinking that this was the plan, to then not being sure what the plan was, to then it happening, and then getting the whiplash of the entire rest of the country being like, first of all, you guys can't do this. Second of all, you guys shouldn't do this. So it's been a whirlwind of every emotion possible regarding this. But at the end of the day, what we said was the plan has been fulfilled. The plan is not completely fulfilled yet. There's still work to be done, but a huge step in the right direction for where this franchise needs to go, and that deserves to be celebrated.
Absolutely. They paid their stars. They paid. I'm not the guy that, I said this, I think, on Saturday. I'm not the guy that likes to break his arm by patting himself on the back. I like to pat you on the back, obviously, John, but not myself. But you and I both said on this show, ever since the T. Higgins, contract extensions talks or conversation started eons ago, that the Bengals pay their wide receivers. They pay their wide receivers. I mean, I wasn't 100% sure both guys would stay long-term, especially back when things were not going so well, but I kind of still teetered over that 50-50 mark on the positive, optimistic side, because this team values wide receivers, because this team has traditionally paid wide receiver skill position players. And when they have a high potency offense, they pay those players. And history has repeated itself in a massive way, an unprecedented way in many ways across the NFL. And before I get your thoughts on the contracts themselves and the numbers and that sort of thing, this was another topic I touched on, is just the national pivot from what a cheap franchise. They're not going to pay their stars. They're going to let these guys walk. They are keeping T. Higgins hostage with yet another franchise tag. What are they doing? What are they doing? Then lo and behold, they pay, and this so-called cheap franchise that cements legacy deals, league-setting deals, and had a league-setting deal with their quarterback recently as well. Now it turns into, what are they doing? Why? How are they going to fix their offense? How are they going to keep Trey Hendrickson? How are they going to get to a championship when they were 9-8 last year with these same guys? And it's just awe-inspiring in, I don't know, I guess a comical and both a just shrug your shoulders kind of way, that the narrative just continues to spin, and it still is a bit anti-Bengals, even when they do things the right way in this regard.
I was never someone that believed that there was like some sort of agenda from a national sense to always kind of paint the Bengals in a bad light. It's starting to really feel like that's the case. And I'm saying that as like generously as possible, because like pay your good players, whatever position that they're in. Like that should be the motto for every NFL team, to pay your players and to pay them contracts that they're deserving of and that are standard across the league. And that's exactly what the Bengals did here. And I think the fact that we kind of do operate in our own echo chamber a little bit, because when we surround ourselves with Bengals news and updates and what seems to be the plan, we knew that this was their intention. When they franchise tag T. Higgins, they did it with the intention of paying him. That's what we've talked about for the past several weeks. And so when they did it, none of us were like, we were still, pleased to see it actually be fulfilled, but we weren't surprised necessarily to see both of these happen at the same time. I think that was a surprise for everyone else. The fact that, it wasn't just like an either or situation where they pay Jamar and then they decide on T. No, they're going to pay them at the same time, which leads to number one, this was a package deal, which seems to be going over the heads of everyone here. This was determined when T switched his agent, that Rocky Arsenault went into those negotiations saying, if you want to get Jamar done, you need to get T done. This was a decision that they both made. And obviously, it's up to the agent to actually facilitate that message to Katie Blackburn and everyone doing the negotiations from the Bengals side. But that was their intention. Like everything that's happened has been intended, like them signing together, them doing the presser together, them with a messaging of supporting each other, that they want to do this together. They're genuine best buds, and they want to continue playing and winning together while also being paid what they're worth. That in and of itself is so objectively cool and rare that you just never see in the NFL or really just professional sports. Two players at the high end of their profession at the same position deciding that I'm willing to share the glory, the spotlight, the targets, everything, especially for a position that's always typecasted as divas. It doesn't exist here. And I don't understand how people who maybe they don't agree that you should pay two receivers, but if you can't recognize that objectively rare and cool factoid of all this, I don't think this is the story for you. But I think what's really, I think in addition to that, though, from a football sense, is that regardless of whether or not the Bengals decided to pay T. Higgins, their biggest problem going forward, it's completely independent of that, because they can decide to pay T. Higgins or let him walk and have more resources, I guess, to build the rest of the team. But if they don't figure out how to draft and develop defensive players, this whole plan is for naught, because they can't keep continuing to buy and buy and buy defensive players like they were able to do a couple of years ago to build a defense that helped them get to the Super Bowl. That they have proven that model is not sustainable. And the only way that they're going to get forward with this plan in place is if they improve in that part. And if that was the talking point, I think from a national sense, I think a lot of people would be able to understand that. But now it's like, how can they do this while they're paying these guys so much money, when in reality, every team spends a lot of money on just a select few players? It just happens to be that this team has organically developed 2 receivers that they drafted in back-to-back years, which in and of itself is rare. It's incredibly hard nowadays to find these guys, let alone in back-to-back years, but they organically developed them. They didn't trade for one of them like the Dolphins or the Eagles did. They developed them, they drafted them, and then they paid them. And now it's like, it's sacrilegious because the defense is crap because they can't develop and draft players on that side of the ball, which is, again, completely independent of what they did with T. Higgins.
So a lot of things to unpack, and I love that rant, my friend. I love it. Number one, and I don't want to call out one national media member in particular because there's a lot who have been kind of dunking on the Bengals about these extensions, but one in particular, there was one facet on a show, I think it was on Speak on FS1, and that is one Keyshawn Throw Me the Damn Ball Johnson, who, lives in USC lore. I mean, one of the better players ever to don a USC uniform, so I respect him. But early this week, he pivoted to, I don't know why the Bengals did this, and more or less said, you should trade T. Higgins and get what you can for him, but then in the same breath said there's not a receiver as good as T. Higgins in this draft. So that's where I go, well, what are we talking about? What are we doing? We're talking about giving away a player to another team and then drafting a replacement that is widely regarded as subpar. So you're making your team worse in that respect. I get the idea of then you can kind of parcel out that money to other spots on the defense. That leads me into this next thing, because I talked about this a little bit, the Al Golden effect, and I did a little stint on Bengals and Brews and Ice over the weekend after our show, which was a ton of fun as well. But they kind of said, what's the plan? And I was saying, well, this is risky because now you're kind of laying things at the feet of Al Golden, but maybe this was the plan going into this offseason, where it is, okay, look, our identity of this football team, for better or for worse, is these three players: Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase. That is the identity of this football team. They are a passing team. They have an offensive-minded head coach who calls, in conjunction with others, calls the plays on offense. That is the identity of this football team. But now you are hoping, and I think they are believing, that Al Golden coming in is now the draft and develop guy, not the rental veteran guy that Lou Anarumo was, where I got to get these proven guys because we got to get this thing going right now. Al Golden now coming from the college ranks and has shown a penchant to develop, younger players at Notre Dame. That is the belief I think the Bengals have, in conjunction with their holding on to this offensive minded identity, that Al Golden's going to be the guy to help draft and develop, and will go less expensive on that side of the ball because we have to. But kind of like what you did on the offense originally, where you went heavy on the defensive contracts and free agency, now you've got heavy offensive contracts that you've secured with your own guys in free agency. And so now you're going to draft and develop and hope that you strike gold on that side of the ball with manageable rookie deals for a handful of years.
Which should have been the plan from the get-go. Like, when you drafted these guys as early as you did in 2020 and 2021, the goal was for them to be as good as they are now, so that then you can reward them and enjoy their prime years while they are contractually satisfied, knowing that all the veterans that you sign on the defensive side of the ball would eventually have to be replaced by younger guys. We've talked about this since 2022, when this was first a topic of discussion about how are they going to pay all these guys on offense. Well, they went out and they drafted a crap ton of guys in defense, and unfortunately, the majority of them just aren't franchise cornerstone pieces. They're not even proven yet because most of them have hardly played. So that has undoubtedly been the reason why they've underwhelmed in these past 2 years, because the defensive guys that they've drafted have not shown to be anything, and they haven't been able to repeat that success in free agency like they did in 2021 and 2022. It has nothing to do with any investment that they were planning to make on the offensive side of the ball, because again, you need to pay your good players, especially the ones who play very valuable positions. So, of course, the plan when Al Golden was hired was to better identify guys in the draft on the defensive side of the ball, because that's where his expertise comes from in the college sense, and be able to implement these guys as soon as possible and have a plan for what they do best, and make sure that you hit the ground running, so you don't run into the same Dax Hill and Miles Murphy issues that you've ran into these past couple years. That's, of course, the plan. I think if there's any level of criticism here for the Bengals, is the fact that you could have been working on these extensions, obviously, last week, while making maybe one or two more, value signings on defense, right? Because now, like, obviously, Al Golden's going to rely on a lot of young players, but I think he still deserved a little bit more help with, again, just a couple of guys that could have helped you out in some positions of need. So if there's criticism for the Bengals, it's definitely there. But the last point I want to make here is also, if it's a discussion between T. Higgins or like a handful of quality veterans, I guarantee you 9 times out of 10, a team would rather take a star in T. Higgins compared to just other guys to fill out your team. And sometimes it does work out, like with the Bengals, like they decided to, pay obviously Cheeto and Mike Hilton instead of William Jackson III, even though William Jackson III is not even remotely close to the star that T. Higgins is now. But like sometimes that strategy does work, but we've just seen time and time again that the NFL is becoming more star driven. And these guys, these force multipliers, like Joe Gerber likes to label them, they matter, man. And they make other players on your team better, even if you're not investing a lot in those ancillary pieces. So having a T. Higgins, man, like the majority of the league would have salivated over him in free agency. They would have paid him significantly more than what the Bengals did. And I don't understand how you can recognize that while saying that, well, the Bengals shouldn't have paid him. Not just paid him, but paid him less than what he would have gotten on the open market. He wanted that contract. He accepted that contract because he loves the Bengals, because he grew up rooting for the team and he wanted to stay here. Like, again, I just the conflict of logic here is astounding to me, and it will never make sense.
And by the way, Honest Fan said John just absolutely cooked. John the Brain Sheeran has since become John the Chef Sheeran, because you are cooking, my friend, and I'm Anthony Jimmy's and Joe's over here, Cosenza. Look, man, this is unprecedented, and you got to credit both of them. You have to credit their agent for getting this across, and the Bengals for getting this across the finish line. I want to get your take on the numbers, because early reports obviously have this as, and this is where it is continued to be unprecedented, not for other teams, but for the Bengals specifically. The contract extensions, the early years or the early reports rather, 4-year, $161 million for Jamar Chase, with $112 million of that guaranteed. Higgins had a 4-year extension, which is guaranteed for the first 2 years, which is significant on both fronts. The guaranteed money, the guaranteed years, not something the Bengals normally do. And I think that shows not only, number one, how much they just truly value these guys, but that they stepped up to the plate and they knew that these guys are key to winning, key to their identity. And I want to pivot back to one thing you said about the Higgins signing and why are people complaining, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, the other factor is, if you're complaining about the Bengals tying this money up, and then what are you going to do elsewhere on your team? You let T. Higgins walk, you have another roster hole you are absolutely scrambling to fill. So that's where I just go, what is happening on that front? Where is that angle to this whole thing? Regardless, your take on the numbers that have been reported thus far, and obviously Higgins' number diminishes the cap hit, at least from the franchise tag mark that he was set to hit, which is helpful too. So your take on the numbers that have been reported thus far on this contract.
First things first, Rocky Arsenault's name was mentioned, I think, officially 15 times in the 30-minute press conference between these two, and I don't think it was mentioned enough, because what a phenomenal job that he did. Yep. And the fact, again, tying both of these guys together and using that as leverage against an ownership group that never responds to leverage, right? The communication that he must have had internally with Katie and Duke and whoever was handling the negotiations, right? I can just imagine it was a 9-day difference compared to what they were used to dealing with T's agent from the previous 2 years. And I think the quality of communication mattered here, because it wasn't like T took a Bengals contract. It wasn't like he fired David Mulugheta to just take a Bengals type contract that they've given out to other players of his caliber. He still got a contract that he should have commanded for in terms of multiple years guaranteed. But the way that I think it was handled this time with new representation made all the difference in the world. And it allowed the Bengals to be like, you know what? You're right. We're going to make this concession. We're going to guarantee a second year. And I think Rocky told Kelsey Conway of Cincinnati.com that if T hit the open market, he probably would have commanded 3 years guaranteed. So that they would make that concession of just having one fewer year guaranteed, knowing that the Bengals would have had to break their precedent in order to get to that spot. But that is the biggest factor in all of this, because whether the Bengals like it or not, Pandora's box has been opened. If you give out multiple years guaranteed to a guy like T. Higgins, because obviously you were going to do that with Jamar Chase, but with T. Higgins, who, as great of a player that he is, doesn't have the Pro Bowls or the All Pros. He isn't the best player at his position on this team. If he can get multiple years guaranteed, then other players like Trey Hendrickson, which we can talk about in a minute, they're going to be asking for that too. Other players, I think, that they've developed and they've had produced for them of T's caliber are going to be looking at that. The agents are going to be looking at that and said, if this concession can be made here, it can be made for us. And hopefully the Bengals are prepared to do that. And obviously, there's not every contract is going to be guaranteed necessarily. There's still ways to get around that. But I think they need to be smart and they need to be open about which types of players are worthy of future years guaranteed, because T. Higgins is 100% absolutely worth it, considering what he could have gotten on the open market. And if they had done this, obviously 2 years ago, or when Jesse Bates was still around, they did it with him, you could just imagine how different this whole situation would have been. Obviously, better late than never, but this is why the T. Higgins contract was so huge. If he wasn't going to take a Bengals type deal and the Bengals still re-signed him, it potentially changes everything going forward.
So I don't want to use the word risk, but I think the Bengals got out of it, especially with the guaranteed first 2 years. They got out of their comfort zone in a big way, just because, and again, not trying to knock the player, great player, but we do know that T. Higgins has a track record of missing a handful of games per year. So I think that in a way is a big step forward for the Bengals franchise, just recognizing a star player and maybe conceding, hey, there's going to be 3 to 4 games maybe lost on this player, but we are still going to fully guarantee, because the record when all 3 of those guys are on the field speaks for itself. The big wins when all 3 of those guys are on the field at the same time speaks for themselves. So, I mean, this is just big news, and it doesn't cure everything. And you still look at this roster and you go, okay, how are you still better than last year? But at least you are not worse. You are not significantly worse if you were to lose one of these players. I don't think Chase was ever in the plans to be lost. I think that was always going to be, a foregone conclusion. But the T. Higgins thing was a little bit of a coin flip, and they got it done. So credit to them, credit to Rocky Arsenault, credit to the Bengals. And this is kind of before we kind of pivot to Trey Hendrickson and some other things that may be coming down the pike for the Bengals, John. I mean, just look at the picture we have pinned up. And you saw the little short video of Joe Burrow greeting them with big hugs in the locker room. We can squash now, and I don't even want to tie this person really into this happy feeling segment, but we can squash the Carson Palmer situation. I'm going to retire, trade me, etc. They've appeased their quarterback. They haven't done absolutely everything, Hendrickson being one and some other help elsewhere, but this is what Joe Burrow wanted. And it's not only what these guys wanted. This is what Joe Burrow wanted. And I kind of lost in that shuffle is something you brought up a second ago with T. Higgins growing up a Bengals fan and all that kind of stuff. What a story for him based on, family history and all that stuff. What a story for him. And I don't want to diminish Chase's own ascension to superstardom as well, but just an all around, you can look at this from so many different angles outside of what the national media is saying, and saying, this is really neat. And it's a really cool thing to witness. The Bengals make this gigantic move or moves with these 2 star players.
Yeah, in the similar vein where you don't want to diminish the player that T. Higgins is compared to Jamar Chase, you don't want to diminish, obviously how satisfied Jamar Chase is right now for getting this deal, for being the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history. But at the end of the day, he had infinite amount of leverage. That's why it was like, hey, either you pay T or you don't pay me, right? That's why Rocky decided to use like Jamar in that sense in terms of leveraging that. With T, as much of a demand that he would have on the open market, like he didn't have as much leverage with the Bengals specifically, and the Bengals are the team that he wanted to play for, that he wanted to continue to play for. You could just tell in that presser, he could not try to play it cool. He was beaming the entire time. The fact that it was 2 years of just constant, just this weight on his shoulders of just trying to just to be recognized and to be valued by the place that he wants to be, that he wants to continue to be at, because this has been a lifetime in the making and he's living out his dream. And yeah, like he may not be the highest paid receiver in the NFL. He may not be he may only be 1A compared to Jamar 1, because that's what Jamar, very politely labeled him, and, in a very good moment in that presser. But this is what he wanted. And the fact that he was able to get it done, I think it was so awesome just seeing him try to hide his excitement, because you could just relate to that. You can relate to T in so many ways. And I think that's what kind of endears him to the fan base a little bit. And this especially showed out on Tuesday.
Paul Brown was one of the innovators of the downfield passing game in the NFL. You look at the track record of the Cincinnati Bengals, and you can look at all the way back, Isaac Curtis and Charlie Joyner, albeit brief, a duo of wide receivers. You can go into the 80s, and you've got Curtis, you've got Chris Collinsworth. Transition that Collinsworth kind of down the pecking order later in the 80s. In that last Super Bowl run, you had Tim McGee, you had Eddie Brown. In the 90s, you had Carl Pickens and Darnay Scott, as well as others. I mean, supplemental players. And then, of course, the Carson Palmer era, ranging from Peter Warrick to Chad Johnson to TJ Hushmanzada, Kelly Washington, Chris Henry. And now you've got, you had AJ Green, Marvin Jones, Marvin Sanu,
Mohamed
Sanu. Thank you. And then now you've got these two, right? And some others that are supplemental players at that position. They like to have multiple quality players at this position. And again, for better or for worse, it hasn't won them a championship, but it's gotten them pretty damn close. So this is what they do, and it's the right move. It's an expensive move. I love Katie Blackburn watching those guys against the wall sign the contract. That was a pretty funny image. But let's move on. We've talked about this a ton. Go check out the Saturday episode we did. And oh, by the way, just in case you want more T. Higgins or anything, we have an older interview with him. So go check that out. And we also talked with Chad Johnson a while back, and he mentioned both of these guys. So if you want some more entertainment and some more background on those guys, go check out those interviews. I think those are pinned in our YouTube show description in case you haven't checked that out. So let's go to kind of going into what's next. We'll talk more what's next outside, but let's a little bit on this. Trey Hendrickson, again, when we went live, I think, gosh, it's kind of been a whirlwind. A little over a week ago, last Tuesday at the onset of free agency, you and I talked, and I kind of shot my shot saying, I think, with just the lack of rumors and all these kinds of things with Trey Hendrickson, at least something concrete saying, oh, the Bengals are mulling an offer or that sort of thing. I was kind of saying, hey, I'm kind of getting that feeling that he stays. And so here we are, close to a week and a half later, he's still on the roster. And now talks are going the way that, our possible extension. Obviously it gets a little more tricky with these numbers now, but I think the Bengals have now pivoted, for better or for worse. If they can't juggle all those plates at once, they've now pivoted to Trey Hendrickson and seemingly trying to work something out. Again, the Bengals still have him under contract for 2025, but they want to get something done and something that works for both parties. And it sounds like they're at least chatting.
Yeah, it's a completely different situation compared to last year. Last year, he demanded a trade because he realized that the extension that he agreed to in 2023 was not going to be enough. And the Bengals, as they normally do, said, yeah, we're calling that bluff. Report to camp. He reported OTAs, so he didn't make a big deal out of it. The communication this year has been, yes, we recognize that you've clearly outplayed the deal that you're about to play on now. We would like to reward you with a raise. It just comes down to how much of a raise is that going to be. And so already significantly more communication this year compared to last year, because last year there was none. So that gives you optimism that not only do they want to get something done, but I think the main goal here is to get something done before this becomes a distraction at the worst possible time. I think they want to avoid, they are so close to going into training camp without a contract dispute. And that hasn't been the case in like 4 years since they went to the Super Bowl. And even then, Jesse Bates was not very happy about how extension talks were going prior to the 2021 season. So that is the goal for them. The hurdles here are, number one, adding enough new money on top of the $16 million that he's set to make. Because if he wants his total average annual value to be like $32 million, then the Bengals would have to offer like a 2-year, $80 million extension, which is Myles Garrett money, which is not going to happen, unfortunately, for Trey. So that's hurdle number one. If they can't offer enough new money to satisfy his complete and total average annual value, then that is something that Trey might hold out for. Also, it's guaranteed money because, again, now that T. Higgins is getting guaranteed money along with Jamar Chase, there's no doubt in my mind that Trey Hendrickson, even though he's already agreed to 2 veteran contracts without guaranteed money, there's no doubt in my mind that he will want at least 1 year, 1 extra year of just future security, because that's 100% what he's going after. So obviously the Bengals want to give him a raise. Trey Hendrickson wants to stay in Cincinnati. They have no intention of trading him for anything less than the first round pick, because that's what was communicated to them by his agent. So it really does seem like a trade is pretty much as close to a 0% possibility. So logic tells you that eventually something happens. It's just a matter of how long this does happen and how long Trey is willing to kind of mold it over and say, you know what, I'm leaving millions on the table here, but maybe it's still my best option. Maybe my best case is leaving, a handful of millions on the table instead of potentially losing out on tens of millions if this comes to a place where he sits out and then teams aren't interested anymore.
Yeah, I think the Bengals are, I don't want to necessarily say a king's ransom, but they want a lot for him, something where they're like, we just simply can't say no to this, even though we're going into this basically saying no to a trade. Here's what I love, John, because we have come so far from those who follow the team, cover the team, root for the team, all that kind of stuff. You can go back, and some of the names I mentioned, star players in some doldrum times for the Bengals, namely Carl Pickens, Corey Dillon, etc., that said, I don't want to play for this team anymore. And then all of a sudden they sign a big deal because it's like, well, the money's there. So, and I think part of them liked it there. They were productive, obviously. And so it made sense to them, even though they publicly said, I don't want to play anymore, or what, all the different things both of those players were disgruntled about at that time. With both the wide receivers that just have been signed and Trey Hendrickson, your three of your 4 biggest stars have made it totally known that they want to make it work in Cincinnati. They want to stay in Cincinnati. They want to win in Cincinnati. So that's a credit to the changes the Bengals have made. That's a credit to Zach Taylor and the culture he has created. That's a credit to Joe Burrow. And so it's very refreshing just to take a step back, even though Hendrickson isn't signed long-term. It's very refreshing that all of these guys are putting that forward, saying, man, I'll do whatever, basically within reason, to make this work. I want to stay here. So I think if, like you said, if it's fair to even somewhat fair type of market value for Trey Hendrickson, I think he's stays and makes it work. I don't, unless the Bengals continue to play really big hardball with him, then maybe things blow up. But I also think, for better, for worse, I don't think it's a good excuse. I do think the Bengals hammer out those 2 big deals, let the dust settle, and then see where the financials are, see where the cap is, see where the future years are, and then say, okay, Trey, these are the parameters we can work within here in terms of an extension. Let's kind of hammer this out. And John, you and I have worked numerous jobs, corporate or otherwise, and you mentioned it earlier with the wide receivers and the agent change there. Communication is key. When the communication is there and you get, there's an open dialogue and, well, okay, let's talk about it. Let's do this, that. When it's stonewalled from either side or both sides, that's when things get contentious. That's when things don't get done. And so that's where I'm hoping this is kind of going now with Trey. And I think Trey's open attitude of I want to stay here. He's showing up at different events and Bengals jerseys and all kinds of different things of late. I think this gets done, maybe not on the time clock that we all want, but I don't see this ending in a bad way unless the Bengals just simply say, now we're going to completely crawl into our shell based on these two unprecedented deals we signed with the wide receivers.
I agree wholeheartedly with that pretext. Do you mind if I hit you with some breaking news though? Not directly involving Trey Hendrickson, but
okay.
Danielle Hunter, who is 30 years old for the Houston Texans. I think he had around 12 sacks last year. He's 30 years old, going to be turning 31 this season. Just signed a 1-year, $35.6 million extension with the Houston Texans. Now, last year, he signed a 2-year, $49 million extension. So his average annual value was like 24.5. But he would be set to play this year on a 1-year, essentially a 1-year, $19 million deal. Trey Hendrickson is about to play on a 1-year, $16 million per year deal. But now we have a data point now that we can kind of relate to Hendrickson a little bit because of age, obviously experience, the fear of somewhat of a drop-off. The Houston Texans did not give Daniel Hunter anything more than just a 1-year extension with a significant pay bump. And now his average annual value, including the cash that he's about to make this year, is quick math. That's like, I don't know, like 26-ish, 27 million.
Yeah,
that's probably a little bit off.
20s. Yeah.
A little bit off. But yeah, like that is now an interesting data point. So Anthony, if Trey Hendrickson is now saying, okay, I understand what the market is now. Someone very similar to me just got this. I want a 1-year, let's call it $34 million extension for next year. Would you give that to him?
So are you asking me?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, excuse me. I'm fighting a little bit of a cold. Yes, I would, because that protects the Bengals because of the age concern that they have there. But I'm glad you brought that up. I didn't see that because we're doing the show and doing other things, but that's another point that I think the Bengals have shown a penchant for in the past handful of years, or big contracts, and that you can go back to the Joe Burrow contract. And maybe that was Joe also, but it was, where's the market? We're not going to set necessarily. Now they just set the market really with these two wide receiver contracts, but there were a lot of precedents in place, right? There were a lot of past contracts where they go, okay, these are what we're using to now construct these. So that in terms of age, in terms of length, in terms of annual average value, all of that makes a lot of sense. And so I think that now will probably be a bit of a centerpiece talking point between both parties for Trey Hendrickson. Now, he may want something a little longer. He may want, to be here through, something through 2027 and not through 2026, but that makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. And I think there is a track record of the Bengals, again, proactive versus reactive. It maddens you sometimes, and sometimes they lose out, but when there is a player who has shown an open desire to remain with the team, that is where they can say, hey, okay, now we've got another benchmark here. Let's work around this and see what we can create.
Yeah, I think the whole point now of like allowing Trey to kind of test his market was to literally see what the market would give him. And clearly it would give him something that he's asking for, which is probably in the low 30 million per year range. I think if I'm the Bengals, I would want him. Me personally, I would want him under contract for the next 3 years, guarantee the first 2, and then give yourself an out in like 2027. I don't think there's going to be this magic fall off that happens after this year. I think you want him on the team for the next 2 years at minimum. And if you're Trey, you want security, you want stability, you want to make sure that you're going to get what you're worth, and you can stay in Cincinnati and raise your family. Those are things that he's prioritized. At the same time, though, if he feels like he can't get the deal that he wants, maybe he would take a 1-year extension just to come back to this point again. Next year, right? Yeah. So I don't know if that's what he would want, but this does make things interesting now in terms of something that he can push for.
It's a great find, and appreciate you bringing that to the table there. And I mean, aside from the on-field production, I mean, if you're talking, I just don't see something like a 10 sack fall off from year to year or something like that. I just don't see it. But aside from that, we're talking about locker room leader. We're talking about a catalyst on the defense. We're talking about, if you're into that sort of thing, he's a spiritual guy, and I think some players resonate to that as well. So I think there's a lot of intangible stuff as well that you're getting with Trey Hendrickson, and the fire for being, the city of Cincinnati, being a Cincinnati Bengal, all of that all resonates. So again, and one other point too that we've talked about before, it's just another example to the rest of the players in the locker room that you are paying your stars. You are paying for performance. You're paying high value for high performance. And that sends a message.
100%. Like, I think I was actually thinking about this before the show, because obviously Burrow name dropped all of these guys that have either been paid or possibly could get paid. And it's not just about like seeing these guys get paid gives you confidence as a player in the locker room that you could also get paid, but also maybe you want to make a good impression on Joe Burrow, right? Just make sure that he name drops you to make sure that you get taken care of. But no, like it does have a ripple effect. And if you go into training camp with all this stuff taken care of, it gets everyone kind of clear headed. They can focus on the right things and all that stuff. So yeah, it's been something that we've talked about for the past year about how it negatively impacts guys. But once you see the best of you kind of rewarded, it gives everyone kind of confidence and makes everyone, play their best.
Well, John, now you're stealing friends of mine. Pork Chop on Bengals and Brews.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Chop and I were friends, and now you're just stealing my buddies. So, man, we may have to reassess things on this show, man. I don't know. You're taking my buddies. Just kidding. We're going to pivot here into what may be next in outside free agency for the Cincinnati Bengals. Just want to remind folks, this is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast, part of the Believe in Cincy podcast channel. You can get this show along with 3 and Out with Jason and Kevin, talking football with Bengal Jim and friends, as well as Matt and Willie No Ball with the coach Matt Minnick and the great Willie Lutz. So go check out all those shows on the Believe in Cincy BLEAV podcast channel through your favorite audio streamer. Leave us a review there. Check out the video stuff we've got on our YouTube channel. If you can't find the link on the screen here, just pretty simple, youtube.com/@BengalsOBI, and you can check out all kinds of different stuff. We've linked some other interviews with T. Higgins, Chad Johnson, and stuff in the YouTube description, so go check those out if you haven't, or rewatch them if you would. That'd be great. And subscribe, do all the things that you like, and check out cincyjungle.com and all the great work that John is doing covering the Bengals at A2ZSports.com as well. Okay, John, well, we can stop patting the Bengals on the back a little bit, because like you said, a team that has been criticized for limited internal resources. You felt like, you're negotiating these 2 blockbuster deals, but could you do a little bit more in outside free agency? Could you do a little bit more to bolster other areas of their roster, namely offensive guard? So what may be next is the question. We do have a free agent profile we're going to squeeze in at the end of the program here, but I do want to say this, that, and it may be an indictment of the free agency, the outside free agency class as a whole. I know Albert Breer of SI famously said that, this is kind of a weaker class than normal. And so you've seen, after a couple of big days, you've seen a real quieting of the market, namely at some positions the Bengals may be looking at, corner, a veteran corner that is, and then of course guard. A couple of guards went early, and then now you still have Tevin Jenkins lingering out there, Brandon Scherff lingering out there, and Dalton Reisner and others that are still kind of hanging out there. So obviously the offensive guard spot with Alex Kappa leaving and then signing with the Raiders is a big hole that the Bengals need to fill. They need to provide at least some semblance of competition for Cordell Volson on the other side. And then of course they've got 6 picks to play with in the draft. I don't want to put words in your mouth by saying but we just mentioned that the draft may be a little bit defensive heavy and say Al Golden draft and develop. So what may be next for the Cincinnati Bengals in outside free agency as things have kind of quieted down after those the first week, really?
Well, follow the money, follow the math. That's always been the case when trying to project this team's next moves. If you have the foresight to kind of see where the cap space is going to be, you could tell that they're going to have around over 30 million in cap space once we have the final details with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. But they already know their cap space situation. So T and Jamar's deals are going to free up at least 10 million in space. I feel pretty confident in saying that. As of right now, we know that they have about $23 million in space. So say that they have $33 million in space. Obviously, the Bengals like to hoard cap space in the offseason. Not that much. So if they extend Trey to anything, they're going to give him a little bit raise. And this cap hit's going to increase a little bit. Probably isn't going to be a full 10 million worth. So, but even if it is, that gives you back down to 24 million or 23 million, right? That's still a little bit too much compared to where they usually are. Once you get to like 18 or 17 million, then you can basically say that they're done in free agency. But I'm going to say that Trey's extension, if it does happen, is only going to eat up about at most 6 million more. So they're back down to 27. I think that's enough room for whatever the best guard available is on the market, or a guard, and then some other type of veteran on the defensive side of the ball. And it really could be any position at this point because they all need help. I think they really were interested in a linebacker, but the market there was significantly more expensive than they anticipated. I think that they're still interested in seeing what the cheapest, most effective defensive lineman veteran that they can find, and that guy may be out there for another couple of weeks, but 100% they're going to sign a guard. Like I'm putting that in pen. There's no reason why they would cut Alex Kappa and not sign anyone to replace him. The signing of Cody Ford was to compete with Cordell Volson and a rookie at left guard or right guard, depending on what position that they decide to put there. But they would not cut Alex Kappa before free agency without signing someone to pencil in at starter at right guard. That is going to happen. It's likely. I think the favorite's going to be the guy that we're going to talk about here in a couple of minutes, but that's going to happen. It's just a matter of if they do something else alongside with that. And I think they're going to barely have enough space to potentially make it work, but you may see them enter the full draft mode with around 20 million in space.
I, oddly enough, think the favorite may be not the person we are going to profile. And unless I'm not caught up with things to the absolute minute, Will Hernandez is a guy who has experience at both guard positions. And John, the Bengals love to maximize the roster at the offensive line with guys who have positional versatility, be it guard tackle, be it playing both guard positions, guard center, all of that, both tackle positions. They love to maximize the roster with that sort of thing. And Will Hernandez is an effective player. He's a proven player. He's had some injury stuff, so he may be more on the affordable side of things. I know a lot of people are enamored with Tevin Jenkins, and the Bengals flirted with him. He reportedly went to Seattle Monday and left without a deal there. So I think teams are a little bit scared of the medicals there. I think things would have to make a lot of financial sense for the Bengals to do that and to splash twice at guard. But I think Will Hernandez is a guy that fits the mold of, okay, look, he could start at right guard, or if we draft another guy that we think is a plug-and-play starter, then we can kick him over to compete with Cordell Volson on the left side, that sort of thing. So I think that makes a lot of sense. That is not the free agent profile we're going to do, but just from, again, hearkening back to Bengals past preferences and trademarks and all that kind of stuff, that's one guy I would see maybe being signing a little bit down the road.
Yeah, I think amongst the top options, he might be the youngest, at least in terms of experience, aside from maybe Dalton Reisner, who, for whatever reason, just never signs with a team in March.
Mercenary, dude.
I really don't understand what's going on with that dude. But no, Will Hernandez makes a lot of sense. Very stout in pass protection. Like you said, has played both sides. I think he kind of resurrected his career a little bit with Arizona. And the only reason why he's still out there right now is because he tore his ACL in October. And you may not know what his medical is at the moment. It's why you're going to get a discount. But I think the Bengals would definitely have interest in him, if not for someone else.
Well, that's someone else. Let's get to it. And that is, because we're coming up on time here, 2025 free agent profile, Brandon Scherff. And this is a guy who is long in the tooth, but he has been a largely effective player, a guy that I think most people are going, why? Why is this guy not signed yet? I think there's a little bit of things going on both sides. Maybe Scherff is biding his time, looking for the exact right place to land. I've got some stuff here to talk about with him. I'm going to try and do something a little bit different. Oh, we've got some music there. I don't know what happened, but here he is. So in college, he was a tackle, and we'll look at this here. He moves well in space, and a guy that just does a lot of good things. He's a stout player. He is a little bit of that throwback guy. Most recently with the Jaguars, was drafted by Washington. He's 6'5", 315. He's entering his 11th season. He is 33, going to be 34 in December. That is obviously what teams are looking at there. He went to Iowa, played tackle there, and was a star player there. And then, of course, like I said, former college tackle, former number 5 overall pick from Washington. He was a 5-time Pro Bowl player from 2016 through 2017, and then again 2019 through 21, All Pro in 2020, and then he signed with the Jaguars before the 2022 season. He's a leader. He's been a team captain. He could be a mentor to a lot of good players. He's experienced. He's had a high-level play throughout most, if not his entire career. Unfortunately, he's a short-term solution to a long-term problem. The Bengals need to shore up those, that interior for the long term. He's good at blitz pickups and picking up stunts. And then the big question is, what kind of contract would you give a guy who is going to be 34 in the season? Now let's look at this again. There he is, just out. He paves the way for a big play here. I'm gonna show that to you again. Hold on, let me go back one sec. Let's go back. He is on the left side here, and just paves the way, and then that's him out in space there. Kind of gives a little nudge there, and then this is him most recently picking up another blocker. Let's go back to that for a sec, because this is a problem. I slowed it down, but one more time. Let's go back. Engages the one guy. They do, yep, and then there you go. And then here's the legend, Kirk Cousins. Here he is going up against Gerald McCoy. And just kind of, McCoy is a borderline Hall of Fame guy, and just kind of gets him out of the way. There you go. Clean pocket for Cousins. And this one I love. He's kind of, look at this, pick up the blitz. Bye. Just play. Is that Reggie Nelson? It might be. Yeah. And just plants him. And then again, another nice play that happens here. Here he is out in space. Doesn't get great contact, but that defender was absolutely not wanting any part of that. So one more. Let's look at it. This is my favorite here. Again, McCoy, and then here he is right here. Engages number 90 briefly, and then sees the blitz and just goes over there and takes out the blitzing safety. Here he is out in space, paving the way there. So, as if I needed to share really any clips on him, because his tape speaks for itself. But again, a lot of those are in a Washington uniform. A lot of those were Kirk Cousins in a Washington uniform. So it's a little bit going back in the past. I did like that clip of the Jaguar where he was with the Jaguars, picked up that, that other lineman there as they traded off. But a guy that could, at least for a year, maybe 2 years, cement that right guard spot, mentor someone else you bring in via the draft, and, bring some locker room leadership along the way.
It is incredible how Iowa just continues to just pump out offensive linemen. They develop athletes like no other, and it's why a lot of them last a long time in the NFL. I believe Riley Reif went to Iowa, if I'm not mistaken, and he obviously lasted 10 years in the NFL and spent maybe the last one with the Cincinnati Bengals. Something that I didn't realize with Brandon Scherff until maybe a couple days ago is that there is a connection here. Scott Peters was a consultant with Bill Callahan with Washington while Brandon Scherff was obviously on the team. So I think there is a level of familiarity between the Bengals offensive line coach and definitely aside, maybe not the best, because Trey Williams was also part of that Washington team, but the second best offensive lineman during the Bill Callahan days when he was in Washington. Bill Callahan now coaches the offensive line for the Titans. The Titans signed Kevin Zeidler, so they don't really have an opening at guard for Scherff to go back to his former coach. But I don't know how connected and close Peters was as a consultant to a star player for Washington, but I think there is a connection there, and I think that's why there is probably interest here. And I think with Scherff, who is 33, he can kind of bide his time because I'm sure there's a demand for him. I think the Eagles are also kind of in on him because they lost Mekhi Becton at right guard. And obviously right guard is the only position he's ever played. So I can't imagine teams are going to ask him to play left guard. But yeah, if you're 33, you've obviously made enough money to be comfortable and you're not going to command anything more than what you made last year. I think his market was probably around like 9 or 10 million. I think the Kevin Zeidler deal sets a good benchmark for him as well. But a place where you think that, yeah, like I'm in an offense where obviously we're going to score a lot of points. I'm going to be relied on in pass protection. That's the best part of his game left. He used to be a dominant run blocker, which is why teams have a lot of confidence in moving him to guard. That's not really part of his game anymore, but he is incredibly still stout in pass protection. But the main reason why I think he's going to be the Bengals' top target here, and maybe there's already been interest in communication out there, is because he had trouble staying healthy in Washington. But for the last 3 years at Jacksonville, he's yet to miss a game. So for a player who's obviously on the older side and the other side of 30, you don't have necessarily those durability concerns, at least from recency. So if there's any issue about his age, at least that part you can say it's not like Tevin Jenkins, where the main reason why Tevin Jenkins isn't signed yet is because of his medical, because teams are really scared of that back injury that's haunted him for years. At least Scherff has proven to overcome that. So I think all of that combined makes him just the most logical fit here.
17 games in the regular season in the last 3 years. Took the words out of my mouth, so I don't have to expand on that. The Ohio 513, I assume this is about Brandon Scherff. How many teams has that fool played for?
This is his number one hater, actually.
Since you don't need him, he's played for 2 in 10 years. So I know a lot of other players who've played for more teams in that span. So, and this is a guy who's played at a high level. I think it's more biding his time. What contract makes sense? What destination makes sense? You think he may be the top target? I can see that. But again, the lack of flexibility of putting him left or right. I see some other people talking about Cody Ford. I mean, if you're comparing even a long in the tooth, Brandon Scherff to Cody Ford, I mean, the pedigree is a lot different. I mentioned the five Pro Bowls, etc. And like you pointed out, again, I don't need to expand further on it. The not missing a game the last 3 years, that I was going to say that, and I found that very, very interesting. Oddly enough, the Pro Bowl years is when he was, when he was missing games and stuff. So kind of an ironic thing there. But a guy that I think brings a lot of value, not only on the field, but again, he's been a team captain, locker room leader, can mentor young guys if you want to draft and develop.
Yeah, and I think the reason why they haven't actually signed a guard yet is because I think that they have been keeping tabs on the entire situation. Obviously, Will Hernandez is still there, Reisner is still there, Scherff is still there. I think any one of those 3 can easily fit and plug and play and just be your solution for this year. There hasn't been any movement there at all. And obviously, and still Tevin Jenkins is still out there. So I think teams are really gun shy and they have cold feet and they want to see which team makes the first move. So they're using this time, obviously, to hammer things out with Trey. There could already be an offer out there for Scherff and letting him just kind of take his time to decide. And maybe they want to move in once they do get things squared away with Trey. Again, not the greatest process. You should be able to you shouldn't have to be stretched this thin, but I refuse to believe that they're just giving up on guard. Like, they will sign someone that they feel confident can start.
Proactive versus reactive, John. You know that. We are coming up on a long one here, but this has flown by. We got to a lot of stuff, and we've got a lot of live viewers. Appreciate you all tuning in live or after the fact. Let's drop the mic and get out of here. I know you've probably got something. I got 2 things, one of which is a question to you, and then, of course, I want to give you your floor as well. But number one, I got to give a little shout out to my oldest son, who is just starting AA baseball, and obviously a big jump there, a couple games in, and yesterday had a big hit, stole 2 bases, and then scored a run that started a rally that had his team so close to winning the game. They lost by 1 run there. So Regan, good job, buddy. Proud of you. I know it's a big jump from single A to AA, but he's doing good. Appreciate his effort on the field. I know he's been trying hard. So Rigi, love you, buddy. The question I wanna pose to you, and I don't know that we talked about this. We've gone through so much content I can't really remember. But Joseph Osai, in his reintroductory press conference, basically said something to the effect of, we tuned things out last year until the last 5 weeks. That's been, whether it's on this show, I've mentioned it, and other shows I've been on, I've mentioned it. I don't know. What kind of stock do you take into that, especially since we've talked about Al Golden being the draft and develop guy potentially this year in the draft class?
Well, obviously he played the majority of his snaps in the last 5 weeks because he was playing behind Sam Hubbard. I don't take a lot of stock into it, just because if you play better beyond a certain point, you don't want to come away with the impression or give out the impression that, oh, we were trying, in the first 11 weeks, but we just stunk. But then we started to really try and really lock in the weeks that we played good. So again, that's just a generalization, but that's why I don't take a lot of stock into it necessarily. But I do think that there were very tangible differences with the way that they conducted themselves on defense and the way they schemed things. And obviously certain players were playing more, so that can't go unnoticed. But if it was an issue of guys not buying in and locking in until December, it might be more of a larger problem, and that's probably why the DC is no longer here. So kind of, sort of, I guess.
Yep. Okay. And what do you got for us on your way out?
I had a thought back in December when T. Higgins had the best game of his life. He had 3 touchdowns against the Broncos. Mm-hmm. Chad Johnson immediately went on Nightcap with Shannon Sharp, and they were talking about, what are the Bengals going to do? And he stood on 10 toes in front of his microphone and said, T, do not take a discount. You do not take a discount on your first deal. Like, the hometown discount is after you get the big deal, right? Like, the Bengals can't do this. They can't pay you. They need to pay the defense. They need to fix the defense. And, there's obviously weight to all of that and everything like that. I was thinking how interesting it was, considering the fact that T grew up a Bengals fan and wanted to play for the Bengals and wanted to continue to play for the Bengals so bad that he actually did take less than what he could have gotten if he chose to continue to make this kind of ugly and, ride this process out and eventually hit free agency and then make so much more money for the Patriots or whatever next year. He could have done that, but he, in effect, took a hometown discount. And I was thinking, how much did Chad Johnson have to do with that? Because of any influence that Chad had on T as a youngin'. But it turns out I was wrong, because I'm just old. T's idol growing up was AJ Green, because he's younger than me. So I don't know if Chad had as much of an impact as I initially thought, because it was the other amazing Bengals receiver in NFL history that had a great influence on him. But that was still kind of interesting to think that, there's a receiver that can potentially be next to Chad in the all-time Bengals record book who decided to go against his own advice. Yeah,
and if you go back to that interview with Chad, spoiler alert on one part of it at least, we asked him, what he thought was the best Bengals, wide receiver trio or wide receiver group in history, including his group. And he mentioned this current group with Chase and T, namely because they made it to a Super Bowl. But that's going to do it for us on the Orange and Black Insider. John, you are the man. All of you, appreciate you tuning in live. Get the show on the Believe in Cincy podcast channel, YouTube, Cincy Jungle, Facebook, etc. Go to cincyjungle.com and A to Z Sports to check out John's coverage of the team as well. We will see all of you very soon, and have a great rest of your week if we don't see you before then. Take care.